Stop scrolling. Whatever you're reading about Trump's latest insult to Mark Carney, turn it off. Because the story everyone is reporting is not the story that's happening. The story is what happened while Trump was typing. And what happened shocked the world. Not because it was loud, but because it was methodical, institutional, and irreversible. On March 10th, 2026, Donald Trump posted on Truth Social. He called Mark Carney the future governor of Canada. Again, this marks the third time Trump used this exact insult since Carney became prime minister. The first came in January 2026 over the China electric vehicle deal. The second came weeks later. Now Trump repeats it again. Same language, same intent, same expectation of compliance through humiliation. But Carney's response is not what Trump expected. Instead of diplomatic protests or defensive reactions, Carney signed $26 billion in trade agreements across 3 continents in 2 weeks. While Trump was mocking, Carney was signing. And every signature reduced Canadian dependence on American market access by billions. Here's what happened. Trump posted on Truth Social about working with U.S. governors to save the Great Lakes from Asian carp. In that post, he referred to Carney as the future governor of Canada. The language deliberately questions Canadian sovereignty by reducing the prime minister to a subordinate official. Trump previously called Justin Trudeau governor during their Mar-a-Lago meeting on November 29, 2024. When Canadians reacted negatively, Trump began threatening economic force to compel annexation. Carney stated he will not comment on every tweet or truth. He can handle it. This response appears dismissive. But examining Carney's actions during the same period exposes the strategic calculation. Between February 26th and March 7th, 2026, Carney visited India, Australia, and Japan. 2 weeks, 3 continents. The visits produced concrete deliverables with documented dollar values. India and Canada signed terms of reference for a comprehensive economic partnership agreement targeting $70 billion in bilateral trade by 2030. Saskatchewan-based Cameco signed a $2.6 billion uranium supply agreement with India's Department of Atomic Energy. India's Ministry of Mines and Canada's Department of Natural Resources signed a Memorandum of Understanding on critical minerals. University of Toronto committed $100 million in scholarships for 200 Indian students. McGill University established a Center of Excellence in Artificial Intelligence with Jubilant Barsha Foundation to train 200 graduates annually. Think about what those agreements mean. These are not press releases. These are institutional structures that persist beyond political administrations. When universities commit funding, they generate bureaucratic momentum. When mining ministries sign cooperation frameworks, they establish regulatory pathways for decades. Students will graduate, build careers, and maintain institutional networks. Political leaders change. Mining projects operate for decades. This is path dependence. This is institutional architecture. This is what Trump's insults are competing against. The Australia visit produced similar outcomes. Clean energy partnership, biennial defense ministers' meetings, joint radar technology development combining Australia's JOR network with Canadian Arctic systems. Carney addressed both houses of Australian Parliament, the first such address in nearly 20 years. Canadian pension funds and Australian superannuation funds announced partnerships with potential investments reaching $1 trillion over 5 years. $1 trillion, and none of this required American permission. The Japan visit on March 6th completed the sequence. Carney and Japanese Prime Minister signed a comprehensive strategic partnership covering defense, energy, critical minerals, trade, and technology. The agricultural component proved most significant. Canada overtook the United States to become Japan's #1 supplier of wheat and pork. Canada now supplies 10% of Japan's total caloric intake. Read that again. Canada displaced the United States as Japan's primary food supplier. While Trump was calling Carney governor, Japan was signing contracts that make Canada more important to Japanese food security than America. The timeline reveals Trump's strategic miscalculation. On January 24th, Trump called Carney governor and threatened 100% tariffs if Canada made a deal with China. Carney had just announced a trade agreement with Beijing. Trump's threat was intended to force Canada to abandon China trade and accept American terms. Instead, Carney accelerated Indo-Pacific engagement. Within 6 weeks of Trump's threat, Carney signed agreements with India, Australia, and Japan worth tens of billions. The mockery did not produce compliance. The mockery demonstrated why diversification was necessary. Here is where American dismissal diverges from reality. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said Carney rose to power on an anti-American message. Bessent called Carney's strategy virtue signaling. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick complained Canada has the second-best trade deal, yet all he does is whine. But while American officials were mocking, Canadian officials were executing. India signed, Australia signed, Japan signed, university partnerships formalized, defense cooperation announced, uranium contracts executed, pension fund investments approaching $1 trillion committed. None of this is virtue signaling. This is institutional leverage. When Trump calls Carney governor, Carney signs agreements that reduce Canadian dependence on American access. Each agreement creates alternate export destinations, investment sources, and security partnerships. The feedback loop between American insults and Canadian diversification accelerates with each Trump post. When Trump questions Canadian sovereignty, he validates Carney's Davos argument that the rules-based order has ruptured and middle powers must act together. European leaders cited Carney's speech. Finnish president called it one of the best speeches at Davos. NATO Secretary General said the speech proves Canada is back. International reactions reveal the pattern. European officials do not mock Carney. They sign cooperation agreements. Australia does not dismiss Canadian strategy. Australia commits to trillion-dollar partnerships. Japan does not question Canadian sovereignty. Japan makes Canada the #1 wheat supplier, displacing the United States. When the American president mocks allied leaders, other allies observe and adjust their calculations. If Trump treats Canada as subordinate despite 75 years of defense partnership and $2 trillion in trade, what prevents similar treatment of European or Asian allies? Trump assumed mockery demonstrates American power and forces compliance. But when American mockery pushes allies toward each other, it creates exactly what Trump's strategy aimed to prevent. The Australia-Canada-India Technology and Innovation Partnership operates independently of American participation. The partnership focuses on critical minerals, clean energy, and artificial intelligence. Australia holds world-leading lithium reserves. Canada provides technology and capital. India offers manufacturing scale. Together, they create supply chain alternatives without requiring American coordination. When Trump calls Carney governor while these partnerships are forming, he demonstrates American irrelevance to middle power coordination. The insult does not stop the agreements. The insult accelerates them by proving that relying on American goodwill creates unacceptable vulnerability. Carney's response operates on institutional grounds. He does not defend sovereignty through diplomatic protests. He demonstrates sovereignty through signing agreements that function independently of American participation. Each agreement reduces Canadian trade flowing to the United States. Canada conducted $1.9 trillion in trade under USMCA in 2023. 75% of exports flow to the U.S. Reducing that to 60% requires expanding exports to other markets by $250 billion annually. India targets $70 billion. Australia builds on $58.8 billion. Japan totals $40 billion. When 25% of Canadian exports flow to Indo-Pacific markets, American tariff threats lose proportional effectiveness. Trump's previous governor insults reveal escalating futility. When Trump called Trudeau governor in November 2024, it contributed to Trudeau's collapse. Trudeau resigned January 6, 2025. Carney became Prime Minister March 9, 2025. When Trump repeated the insult against Carney in January over the China deal, Carney proceeded anyway. When Trump threatened 100% tariffs, Carney signed deals with India, Australia, and Japan. When Trump mocked again today, Carney already had institutional agreements operational. The first comment contributed to Trudeau's resignation. The second produced the China deal Trump opposed. The third came after Carney secured alternate markets, making American tariff threats survivable rather than catastrophic. Each repetition proves the insult has lost effectiveness. Trump views international relationships as leverage opportunities where insults and threats extract concessions. Carney views relationships as institutional frameworks where legal agreements and investment commitments create predictability that survives political volatility. When these approaches collide, institutions outlast insults. University partnerships create talent pipelines for decades. Defense cooperation establishes joint exercises and intelligence sharing that military bureaucracies sustain. Critical minerals agreements create regulatory frameworks for 20 to 30-year mining projects. Political leaders change. Mining projects operate for decades. This institutional depth is what American officials failed to understand when dismissing Carney's strategy as virtue signaling. Institutions create path dependence. Once universities establish exchange programs, they create constituencies invested in maintaining them. Faculty build research partnerships. Students form professional networks. These constituencies lobby governments to maintain supporting policies. This is not rhetoric. This is structural power. And structural power operates on timescales that outlast presidential administrations. Trump mocked Carney as governor again today. But while Trump was posting insults, Carney's agreements with India, Australia, and Japan were generating trade flows, investment commitments, and security cooperation worth tens of billions of dollars. The mockery did not stop the deals. The mockery proved why the deals were necessary. When the American president treats allied leaders as subordinates, those leaders build partnerships that function without American participation. The lesson is simple but devastating. Institutions outlast insults. Every time Trump questions Carney's authority, Carney signs an agreement that makes questioning irrelevant. Every time American officials mock Canadian strategy, another country commits billions to partnership with Canada. Every time the insult is repeated, the effectiveness diminishes while institutional alternatives strengthen. Trump wanted compliance. He got diversification. Trump wanted subordination. He got sovereign partnerships operating independently of American approval. Trump wanted to demonstrate power through mockery. He demonstrated irrelevance through institutional exclusion. 3 insults, $26 billion in institutional agreements, and a clear demonstration that in the contest between rhetorical attacks and institutional leverage, institutions win every time.